Alright, for the next 933 hours, we'll go over every single feature of Clip Studio and... nah. You clicked on the video because you want to learn Clip Studio as fast as possible, so we're gonna do it the practical way, by actually using only what you need, so that by the end of the video, you'll be able to produce some kind of piece of art with it, alright? Disclaimer. This assumes that you have some sort of pen tablet, as you do need pen pressure. Please do not use a mouse, that's not going to work out. And I'm using the computer version, not the tablet one, so I will refer to keystrokes for that. Okay, let's go. So, the first thing that happens when you click on the Clip Studio icon is you're presented with this completely useless screen, and there actually is a way to skip this by going to the folder and creating a shortcut, but I'm not going to cover this now. Let me know if you want to know how to do that. I might cover it in the community tab. But you can actually access your projects if you have previous stuff here, but all of this is completely useless, so I'm just going to click on Draw to start the actual software. And if you had nothing open before, you'll be presented with a new document panel. I'm going to choose a 4K preset because it's a big enough size. I highly recommend not working small because that's going to look like very pixelated. So pick something that's at least 2000 pixels on the smallest side, okay? 72 PPI resolution is fine because we're working digitally. If you were to print this, you would probably want to go up to 300. But in any case, we're working with pixels, so it doesn't really matter that much. So let's click OK. The preset, by the way, is the first one, illustration. And here we are. So if it's the very first time, you probably have nothing selected, or maybe the zoom tool. So this is the toolbar, and you can get your tools from here. I'm going to choose one of these brushes. This is the brush palette. And because I don't like the default brushes, I actually customize them. You will actually probably also notice that my interface is slightly different from yours. I have moved the panels around so that it's slightly more convenient for me to access, like the color picker is on the right. And I do recommend that you do the same thing and put panels wherever you like this bar here is actually floating. It's usually stuck here, and you're also going to see the brush sizes, but that's kind of inconvenient for me, at least. You can also use keystrokes like B for brushes, P for pen, or pencil, I guess, if you keep hitting P. And you will see changes around here. Also, some of these icons are different and change depending on the tool you have selected. Like you can see they change a little bit, just get used to it. But anyway, because I'm going to be using my own brushes for this, I actually make them available completely for free. So if you want, you can just grab them for the video description. Actually, let me show you real quick how to add them here. It's actually pretty simple. Once you have the panel selected, you can just, let's say I'm going to use this unused tab, and I grab the brush and just drag it here, and there it is. So as simple as that. So I'm going to be using these brushes. Let me delete this. You can also delete tools with this little icon. Beware of the fact that these cannot be brought back. And the neat thing is, though, that you can actually import Photoshop brushes in the exact same way. So just take them and grab them there. There's also a way to download materials, but we're going to see it later. For now, let's just, start doodling around to get a feeling for it. And you will see that if you use something, let's pick the triangle brush. Sorry, the hard round brush. So depending on how much pressure you put in, you will actually see thinner or thicker lines. By the way, I'm hitting Control Z to undo, and I'm using the brackets, this to reduce and this to increase the brush size. Also, down here, I hope you can see it, down here you have the canvas size, or sorry, the current zoom level. So if I hit Control plus, Control minus, I guess it's Command plus, Command minus on Mac, you can zoom in or out. You can ideally keep it zoom out if you're just drafting out your drawing, and then zoom in as you get into more of the details. But hey, look, we are actually digitally drawing now. And I keep hitting Control Z to undo this. That's pretty cool and all, but here is my first hard advice. Go to File, as the very first thing, pen pressure setting, and adjust this. Now you can let Clip Studio do it, and this is going to ideally adjust to a pressure sensitive level that you're comfortable with. It's not always perfect, and you might have to change it. Like if I if I do it with this, it's kind of skipping some strokes for me. You will have to find your best setting. I tend to like to use it as a default straight line for a lot of these brushes, but sometimes I have to change it because not all of them behave the way I want. Again, this is a hard advice. Do it because you want this to be as comfortable as possible for you to draw with. So do customize it as you prefer. As I said, for brushes, I tend to group them and access them with the letter B. So even if I have, say I hit P, which is inconvenient for me because I have a one-handed keyboard, but I can use, pens, markers, and whatnot. I don't really care for these, so I actually group them all, or all of them, or the ones I use under one tab. I can probably get rid of all of these. And they're always here, I can always access them, so it's very convenient. When I switch brush, I can just do that. And now I'm gonna time-lapse a sketch, but before that, let me explain a couple more things. So if I'm drawing something and I want to erase, now I have an eraser here, but I don't want to do that. I'm actually bound the key X to the transparent brush, which is right here. So if I do that, you'll see, maybe a little bigger, the strokes are gonna erase what I have here. I can go back to black, and that's gonna switch between. Right, it's pretty convenient. Also, you will see me do this many times. You will see this icon appear here. This is the lasso tool, which is right here. It's a selection, so you're probably gonna have this by default. But I like the lasso tool because I can circle something like this, and then I can hit delete to erase it, or I can hit Control T to change and transform it, and then hit OK, which is basically enter. That is extremely useful. You will see me do this many times, so I thought I would rather mention it as soon as possible. Now, as I work on this, I noticed that I did not mention a very fundamental tool that I always use, which is the liquify. And this allows you to push your drawing basically, and I do it very often. So just be aware of that. If you don't like how something is looking in your drawing, just push it around, pulling and pushing. And there are several options here which I invite you to explore on your own. But this is basically the only one I use, or the one I use 99% of the time. It's very convenient. You can just nudge things ever so slightly and make them look way better and more dynamic. Also, one thing you should probably do very often is flip your canvas. Now, I have it bound to F3, but you can also go to, I think it's Edit. You can also go Rotate, Flip the Canvas. You can see I have it bound to F3. That's very convenient to check the drawing, see, from one side and the other. Obviously, I don't want to forget to save when I have something half decent on my canvas, so I'm going to hit Control S or go to here and save, and I'm going to choose a name for it, like a tutorial dragon, and save. Notice that, let me go back to it, you can actually save in various formats, including PSD. Clip Studio can open PSD. It has some issues with CMYK color space, but everything else works quite similarly to Photoshop, so be aware of that. And do save often. You really don't want this to crash on you and lose all of your progress, okay? Okay, so this looks half decent. Now I can also hit V to move it around, and you can do the same thing by using the lasso tool I mentioned a while ago. I can take it and move things around, which is particularly useful. But if I want to refine this drawing, I have a couple of things or methods that I can use. So first, I'm probably gonna use something like an ink brush. You don't have to, but that's what I do for a lot of things. Actually, recently I've been using this one. This is not a tutorial on digital painting, so obviously I'm not gonna go into the details of it. But let's say we're gonna ink this. So I'm gonna use this Saipan brush. That's also another free brush you can get. And you'll see that, well, you know, if you go over it, it's going to be completely destructive because this, and you can toggle the visibility of the layer by going here. This is the layer palette, by the way. it's on the same layer, and you don't want that. You don't want to destroy this thing as you go ahead and ink it. So what you can do here is, again, on the layer palette, there are a bunch of buttons here. Don't be afraid. They're actually pretty easy to remember. I'm going to create a new layer. Now, this says raster layer. I'm not going to use vectors for now because it's a bit of an advanced topic. We might actually have a separate inking tutorial with that. But I'm going to create a new layer, and now I can draw on top. And if I disable this, you can see it's completely on top. I can delete, do whatever I want, and it's not going to destroy the previous one. But it's still kind of hard to see, so there are a couple of things you can do. You can change the opacity by clicking this bottom layer and reducing the opacity, which is already pretty useful. So this would be enough probably. Or I can hit Control B to color the layer as basically a draft blue pencil kind of thing. And that's going to make it even easier to see. I can actually combine the two, and that's what I mostly do when I ink. So I can go over, and it's going to be much more easy to see. And if you wonder where this setting is, it's actually here on this half hidden layer. So I can go here and change the color to anything. I like blue though, it's easier to see through. So again, I'm going to use the Saipan inking brush. There are several. A lot of people use the Real G pen. Oops. Honestly, I don't like it very much. I prefer something a little more subtle, and this is not my preferred way to ink. I still like to ink in Paint Tool Sai, but it's not terrible. And so I can go over this and start inking at a decent size, and probably want to zoom in a little bit on this and start inking this dragon. Now I'm not gonna have you go through all of it, but you will notice when you do this that there are some lines that you can pull easily and some you can't. And if you want to make things easier for you when you ink, apart from flipping the canvas, obviously, you can also rotate it by hitting R and rotating around. You can also find it here, as you can see in toolbar. And when you want to reset it, just hold Shift while you rotate and it's gonna snap in place. I think there are increments of 45 degrees, it looks like. Yes, 45 degrees. So as I said, I'm not going to have you sit through the whole process of this, so I'm just going to go ahead and ink it and then come back in real time. Alright, this is probably enough for this. Now, we want to somehow color this because it's called digital painting, not digital drawing, right? So assuming that the line art is fairly clean, you have a few options. Actually, let's start with the non-clean options. If your line art is not clean, your best tool is the lasso tool, so you're going to have to go over the whole thing little by little and then fill it. But this is fairly clean. Let's see how the magic wand works. So hitting W, I'm going to bring up my magic wand, and I have a separate video about this, so it should be linked right now on screen, or in any case in the video description. I recommend you check it out. But I'm going to click outside this, and it did select the outline. So in the default version, you might have a bar popping out at this point. I have it here, so I'm going to invert the selected area. Then I want to create non-destructive changes again. So I'm going to go on the bottom layer. Then I will create a folder, and I'm going to create a layer mask. So let's see what I did. I'm going to create a layer inside this, and then hitting G to bring out the fill tool. You might not have it bound to G, so it's just this paint bucket tool. And making sure that it says refer to only editing layer, I'm going to fill it with a generic color. And you can see it's a little dirty. So doing it this way will definitely require some level of fixing. So I can go back to my hard round brush, switching to transparent, and then going on the mask, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I'm also gonna go ahead and fill this area that's, you know, not really supposed to be filled 100% because it was empty. So I'm gonna hit G again and fill it with white so that everything that's white on the mask is basically gonna be visible. Everything that's black is not gonna be visible. So I'm gonna go just back real quick and refine some of these areas again. And this is gonna take some practice to get used to in terms of making it as quick as possible. Again, I use Sai for this part because I find that it creates slightly cleaner masks. But Clip Studio is fine. And actually, the fun thing is that you can technically soften this. So you can take the blur tool, which is this, and if you want a softer border, you can actually do it like this. It's a little weird. You know, let's go back and use a triangle brush maybe to create this slightly more painterly finish for the end of the drawing here. Something like this. And the cool thing is that we can use masks on everything. So if I apply a mask to my, and it's completely blank mask at this point, to my line art, I can actually go here and erase part of this with my eraser slash fill brush. And black and white doesn't really matter as much here. Not always in any case. So I can just go back and erase some parts that I don't want to be so prominent. Like maybe I want some of these lines inside to be less prominent. So I'm just going to go ahead and make them more faint. Something like this to give a hierarchy to lines, right? Then I can go back here to my red color and I'm gonna change it again with G to something more of a usable color. Maybe something like this. This is gonna be our flat color, something like red. Red dragons are cool, right? Maybe something like this is better. Yeah, like a blue-gray also works because I can use a contrast. Again, this is not a digital painting tutorial, so just follow along as best as you can. This is just an example. Then I want to create other layers for different colors. So inside this very group, I'm going to go ahead and create selections for parts that I want to be of a different color. Again, they don't have to be selections necessarily. You can paint them if you want, as long as you're in a different layer, that's going to be fine. I'm going to create selections. It's a little quicker and a little cleaner, but anything you feel is appropriate works. Again, experimenting is key here. So maybe I want to use this sort of color here. Right, something like this. Maybe, you know what, I don't want it to be so clean. So I'm going to go ahead and use this here. And again, it's a different layer, so whether you do it flat or not really depends on the kind of style that you want to apply for this. I like a slightly more gritty style, so something like this works well. And then I'm going to make one for maybe the inside of the mouth. You're not very concerned, or I'm not very concerned with values at this point, so I'm just going to blast in some colors. These are going to be, again, our flats. If you're familiar with flats for comic books, that's exactly what this stage is, or what I'm doing right now. And since I'm not happy, 100% happy with the eye placement, I can actually go back anytime and modify this and maybe even liquefy it and slowly nudge it down. Like something like this maybe works a little better for me. You can even make the eye slightly more closed. Something like that looks pretty cool. And if this is too high again, I can move it ever so slightly lower. Again, it's very versatile. So and if you feel like you're getting lost, you can always rename the layers by double clicking and say this is horns. This is gonna help keep a hierarchy maybe a little easier than just generically naming them as they come. But this looks kind of flat. So what we can do here, again, I like to group things, so I'm gonna group these layers like this by hitting Control G, at least for me. And if you don't see that, you can just select all the layers, right click, and create folder and insert layers, which is basically the same. But I want to add some shadow now, so I'm gonna do it with another layer. I'm gonna create a shadow layer. So I'm gonna make a new layer on top of everything, and I'm gonna set, this is a drop down for blending modes. I'm gonna set this to multiply. If you use Photoshop, you might be familiar with it, but there are a plethora of these. For now, I'm gonna use multiply, which is basically adding color to the bottom layer and making it darker. And I'm gonna use something like this sort of, it can be gray, it can be anything, it can even be black. Actually, if I make it black, let me use a hard round maybe. So if I make this black, I can reduce the opacity to make it look kind of like a shadow. But I prefer to use something like a middle gray. So I'm gonna map out all my shadows with this, and I'm gonna use this sort of brush. Hard brush is fine if you're mapping them out. Again, it really depends on your style. It doesn't have to be gray, it can be anything. In fact, I don't recommend it to be gray, but again, this is not a tutorial about digital painting, so anything is fine for now. I'm gonna use this gray here. Also, if at this point when you're working on your piece, you find that you keep having to zoom in and zoom out, one cool trick is to go to Window, Canvas, and make a new window, and then take this to another screen if you have it, or keep it smaller in case something like this floating, so you always have access to a big version of your painting. And once you have it all mapped out, again, you can go back either using the blending brush and start like poking away at some of these shadows, or using another brush and nudging and refining as you like. Again, this really depends on what you're going to use in terms of style, but I feel like doing something like this is very controllable, so it helps you especially in the beginning. And because we're using multiply, we can always duplicate this by grabbing the layer and dragging it to a new layer icon. And this is automatically going to make things darker, which is very useful in case you just want to increase contrast real quick. Now, let's say we change our mind and we don't want this to be completely gray. Well, in this case, we can just lock the opacity and transparency and take another color. And then maybe taking the hard round and going over it like that. So it changes the color only of the parts that have been painted already. Let's go back to this. I'm actually gonna keep it gray because I kind of like it. And I'm gonna add something on top. Again, this looks a little blend, I would say, or a little dull. So I'm gonna create an overlay layer, blending modes, so overlays here. And I'm going to choose maybe a brighter color and start adding something a little more like this. Maybe a little too strong. Then we might want to use something like a screen maybe to add some highlights. So I go back here and I take some of these parts and highlight them. Actually, overlay, either overlay or screen probably work well for this. So depending on what you're doing in terms of style, either of these are going to work. The difference in this case is that screen tends to be pretty much white, while overlay kind of takes the color of what's underneath. So it really depends on what kind of effect you want to give to your piece. I like both, honestly. So it really depends on the piece every time. But say I want to increase darkness, again, I can go back with some multiply layer and just add, say, what if I want to add a core shadow? I'm going to go back and add something like this, slightly darker, maybe not this dark. One thing that's really cool is the add glow. If you take something like a bright yellow or orange, it's going to create this sort of like really like a glow effect, maybe a little more of a pink to your piece. And I like to add a highlight, or let's say basically a rim light with this here and there. I just think it's really cool, even to brighten maybe. Okay, it's looking pretty good for a sketch. I'm going to save this. And as a very, very last step, one other feature that I think is really crucial is being able to color the line art. So I'm going to create a new layer on top, and I'm going to click this clip to layer below icon, and now I can just quite literally paint on top of my line art. And this can create, like, you can see this is completely random, but I actually like this effect. This is completely random, like really, this is random, but I like this. It looks like gold. I'm not going to use this, probably, but I think it's really interesting, the kind of effects that you can create. Usually I go back with something like a dark version of the color that's already there, so that the lines don't pop so much. And you will see this done a lot, actually, in anime drawings, where you see some of them have lines that are colored like the colors around it, or around them. And again, you can see it doesn't really take that much if you already know how to draw, which is the main problem. The software obviously is not going to make a big difference, but I think Clip Studio is very versatile, so you can definitely make a lot of things with it. And you can always use the transparent brush to pull back and erase some of these if you're not happy with how it's looking. Now when I have this, I can always group these layers. Again, Control G. I can duplicate it with Control J, and now I can merge these layers, and I can technically go ahead and paint opaquely on top of this. Like, I can literally take one of the blending brushes, like either the oil pastel or anything else, and this is going to blend everything together. So if I don't like how it's looking now, this is probably a little too much. I can always come back and change this any way I like and make it a little more painterly at this point, right? So if I want to blend all these, I can do that real quick. But again, as I said, you can either get my brushes, or, since I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, you can use materials. Now, the menu is under Window, Material, and let's see, whatever, any of these. And if you don't see anything you like here, these are the default materials. You can find a lot of these. It's a bit of an advanced topic. You're probably not going to need a lot of this stuff. You can go on search materials on Clip Studio, and it's going to open a browser. You probably noticed it in the home too, actually. Like here, top free materials. You can go here, say see more, and you can download brushes. You can get like the tentative GPan. It's just going to download the material by clicking download here, and then let's actually do it. It says the material has been downloaded. You can go back here and it should appear in download, and again I'm going to put it somewhere like in my unused. Well, it appear here, but anyway, doesn't matter. And then you can just use them, right? If you want to export the painting to something that's visible to other people without any software, so like JPEG, PNG, it's File, Export Single Layer, and then you can choose whatever you want to export it in. But again, I highly encourage you to experiment with this because obviously it's going to take some time to get used to it, and the sooner you start, the better it is. Obviously, as I said, the software is not going to make or break your drawing because it is just a software. So if you actually want to improve your drawing skills, you might be interested in this other video of mine you can see on screen right now. If you liked the video, leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. As always, have a good one and take care.